Hi, it's Dirk from Sentry again. In this video, we are going to instrument the boilerplate Vite project that we created last time around with Sentry to capture errors as well as performance data. So let's get started. This shouldn't take but about 5 minutes. So first things first, let's grab the boilerplate that we saw a few videos ago when we created the project and use that as a starting point. So React Sentry GitHub. We can go into this little cog icon to get to our settings, and then we'll just scroll down and go to instrumentation. And this takes us back through that same app selector that we had before and gives us our boilerplate configuration. So first thing we need to do is install the Sentry packages. If we flip over to VSCode, we can just paste this in the terminal, and it's going to install our Sentry packages. Let's look in here and we see, yep, it absolutely has been installed. Great. Next, we need a couple pieces of this code. So we definitely need these two lines. We don't need the app from app. We'll go ahead and grab it all, and then we'll just delete that app from app. And let's just drop this in here. And we don't need to import app from app. We're in our app component at this point in time. Let's shift this back down. Now we have our package and we have our base initialization of the Sentry package with our DSN. Typically, you're going to potentially put the DSN in environment. You probably also do this next part in environment. So I want to add here a release and have this be something. Because we're going to use this in a couple places, I'm going to go ahead and just create a quick variable up here to put our release in. So we're going to call this React Sentry GitHub, and then we'll just call it version 1. And then down here, of course, we can call this release and add a comma. Some comments here around our sample rate. We can leave it at 100% right now, which is what 1 designates, but you could, of course, change this to something else. If you wanted to make it 50%, you could put 0.5 in, for example. Let's just leave it at 1. I already wrote a really simple class that extends the built-in error class so that we can use this to fire off a custom message. You can see here in the other code that I have, I'm importing this from Vite's environment variable. So it requires you to place this little Vite in front of it so it'll pull it in. But I'm not going to create an environment file right now. We could, but for purposes of this, I'm just going to put the release in here so we can see it directly correlated when we generate our error. So now that we have a validation error, the only other thing we need to do is we just need to create a function in our component that handles the click. So we could say something like, handle click, or handle create error, or whatever it is that we want to call it. This is going to take a message, and then in here we're just going to call that class. So we're just going to throw that new validation error within this. So it's going to pull that message and just toss this error. And what that will do is name the error in Sentry. And I find this to be useful when you're testing, just to get a really explicit error message. The SDK will manage all of this and instrument all of this for you. You don't need to do any of this when you're first going. We could have just lived with this piece, and it's going to go ahead and pick up errors and performance information automatically. But just to be explicit, I like to set this up for testing. Again, you don't need to do this if you're actually setting this up from scratch. The next thing that we're going to do is we're just going to wrap this in an extra curly brace, and we're going to drop in our handle click now. So if we do handle click, then we can say, something like, Houston, we have an error. And this will be the message we'll see in Sentry. So this should all be good now. One last thing that I like to do, given that we're in a React setup, I like to wrap the app component with the Sentry profiler. So instead of exporting just the default app, we can export it with profile. And what this will do is it's, as you can see, with the profiler, it's a high order component. It basically wraps the, it wraps your app, and then it pushes some additional information around performance to Sentry. So I like to do it this way. But in any case, this should be done. We should be able to fire up now our Vite app, and if we wrote everything correctly, it should fire right up. npm run dev. Hopefully we get this, yes. And now we can open this up in demo, and now we have a count is 0, no errors here. If we click this, we should get an error because we're forcing an error basically, and then we can switch back over to Sentry and take a look at that. So here's our uncaught error. If we jump back to Sentry, jump back to projects, go to issues, now we have Houston, we have an error. So our very first error, if we dive into this error, we'll see some basic information about it. Again, super simple at this point. We're not really doing anything here. We don't have any additional services connected. There were probably some problems pulling source maps in because my IP address is restricted, but everything else looks like it came across fine. You can see the auto instrumented tags that came across. You can see our error message. You can see all kinds of information about this, where the problem is, the line that the problem was on, some additional contextual information in the stack trace, and then breadcrumb information leading up to that error. So it's all good. So now we have, not only do we have errors pulled in, we have performance. We probably aren't going to see any performance events yet, but they'll come later as we expand the app. So hopefully that all made sense. In the upcoming videos, we'll do some other things like connect to GitHub and upload source maps and other fun stuff like that. So stay tuned. Thanks.